Hey people, welcome to the Run Testers. It's Kieran here, and today we're going to be talking about this. This is the Saucony Endorphin Pro 2, the follow-up, unsurprisingly, to the Endorphin Pro 1, which is basically Saucony's carbon-plated super shoe racer, a kind of AlphaFly, Vaporfly botherer, if you will. Now, I think it's fair to say with this shoe that not an awful lot has changed. There are only sort of minor details, minor tweaks here. Saucony has decided not to change something that they thought was working. Now, we were big fans of the Endorphin Pro 1 on this channel. Nick was a huge fan of this, and we've been excited to get into this, test this out and see if the number 2 lives up to the same kind of billing. So Saucony says that this brings an improved fit and a little bit more support, but we're really talking about tinkering and tweaks rather than a massive overhaul here. So let's have a look, see what we made of it, and here's our review of the Saucony Endorphin Pro 2. So first off, let's dive into some of the most important stats, starting with the price. This comes in at £190 in the UK and $200 in the US. That's exactly the same price as the original Endorphin Pro, so no change there. When it comes to weight, the shoe that I had, which is in a UK men's 8.5, came in at 230 grams. That's about 8 ounces in your US money. So the listed stats for this are that the men's come in at 7.5 ounces or 213 grams, and the women's will come in at 6.3 ounces or 179 grams. That's heavier than a Vaporfly 2 and slightly weightier than an AlphaFly as well. You're going to get an 8mm drop with 35.5 mils in the rear and 27.5 mils in the fore. So when it comes to fit, I ran in a UK 8.5, which is my size, and I found that these ran true to size. That's exactly what I would be buying if I were looking to use these shoes. I think that they've got brilliant instant kind of step-in comfort. I had good lockdown, no slipping, ample room in the toe box. Yeah, good kind of tight lockdown over the midfoot, really comfortable kind of and hold in the heel. So yeah, sizing wise, I would be recommending people go true to size in these. So when it comes to design, picking what's new from the original Endorphin Pro versus the Pro 2 is actually quite tricky. Apart from this kind of crazy looking colorway that they've designed here, which looks to me like a pair of chef's trousers or a pair of chef's shoes, there's not much to choose actually. You're getting exactly the same PWRUN PB midsole foam in the same kind of design, the same geometry. You've still got that speed roll technology that we love that sort of helps with a really nice kind of easy, efficient sort of transition from heel to toe that was great. The uppers look the same. There are a few tiny changes. You've still got this nice kind of breathable mesh upper that feels really nice on the foot. It's really nice, light, airy, feels comfortable, wraps the foot well. But really one of the big details here is you've got these two sort of, in the lacing structure actually, you've got these two sort of ties here that help to get a lockdown fit. And you've actually got a little bit of added elastic here. And again, that just sort of helps with sort of closing this lacing closure and holding that foot in place firm across that midfoot. Not that we particularly had any kind of problems with sort of slipping and that kind of with the Endorphin Pro, but for some people who may have, they've improved that here to give you a little bit of extra lockdown fit across the top. You've got a gusseted tongue. It's not like a full sock, it's only kind of like a slight sort of half gusseted tongue here. It feels a little bit flatter, I think, or thinner than the original Endorphin Pro. There is a small tab here on the top of the tongue, which helps you kind of pull that and get this sort of flat tongue in place. The tongues actually sit really nicely, I think. They wrap across the top of the foot, means that there's enough sort of protection here for when you're lacing down nice and tight without too much padding, adding too much weight. When you sort of go back into the heel of the shoe, there's ample cushioning here, just about the right balance, I would say. The step-in comfort of these I've found to be really, really nice. They're the kind of shoe that disappears on the foot the moment you put them on, you want to go and run in them. There's enough protection in the heel, nice and soft here without being over padded. And just around this kind of bit that sort of goes beneath the bottom of the ankle joint, you know, it's enough to make him really, really comfortable. You know, somewhere between a sort of really lightweight racer and sort of that kind of more plush ride that you might get from an everyday trainer. I think Saucony has made the balance here really, really nice. So flip them over, and on the outsole here, there's no change at all. You're getting what is probably like a pretty standard kind of racing outsole here with rubber reinforcements just where you need it to add a bit of grip and a bit of durability. It's exactly the same as the Endorphin Pro 1, so no change here. And again, found that to be perfectly fine on the run tests that I've done. So you have still got quite a lot of exposed sort of midsole foam here, which initially when we had the Endorphin Pro 1, we were a little bit worried about the durability of that and how that would cope, particularly if you ventured a little bit off-road onto some of those kind of maybe gravelly trails. Again, I think this is a shoe that you're going to want to stick to pretty much on road 99% of the time. And yeah, but overall that durability that we had with the original kind of Endorphin Pro 1, you're going to get the same durability here. And we had no issues with that. Nick's put in, I think, sort of 400 kilometers more in his Endorphin Pro 1s, and he hasn't had any problems with those. Nothing really has changed, so nothing major to report there from the midsole and the outsole, same performance. So one other detail I wanted to point out that you may or may not know from the Endorphin Pro 1, but the insole here and this whole kind of heel construction, you've got sort of like a slightly sculpted insole here, and that really sort of the heel just, it's sort of rounded, so the heel just sort of slots nicely into the shoe. It almost feels like a bit like a bucketed sort of Hoka feel to that, and I think that kind of that hold around the heel was really nice with these shoes, and it just makes for an overall kind of real super comfort with these shoes. I've loved putting these on from the moment I first tested them. I've run all kinds of mileage in them, and yeah, that's one thing that I think has been really, really nice. They're a pleasure to run in. And that brings me quite neatly on to the run test. So the mileage I've done in these has been a bit mixed. I've done some shorter, faster stuff, faster intervals. I've also done some long runs. So the furthest I've gone in these is 18 miles. And I've done around about sort of 50 miles, I think, in total. So I've mixed up the paces. I have actually taken them a little bit off-road onto those light compacted sort of gravel paths that you might find in a park or riverside, which I often running. That's often how I do my training. And the first thing to say, I've really enjoyed running in these shoes. I think the thing that struck me most actually is about how versatile they are. That 18 miler, I went out and tried to run a bit of an interval session where I did 20 minutes easy warm up, then did 5 miles at marathon pace, about 7:20s for me at the moment, and then tried to shift up to half marathon pace at sort of 6:40s, then back down to the marathon pace at 7:20s. Now, I managed to do some of those miles at that target marathon pace, but also a lot of it was quite sloppy because I ran like absolute nonsense that day. And one thing that struck me is how well these coped when I was running badly, actually, and how forgiving they were when I was actually not running at my optimum pace, or particularly at my optimum form, which I think is the better way to look at these shoes. A lot of the time we talk about carbon shoes, we're thinking about pacing. Really what we're sort of saying is whether or not you're running at your best form to get the most out of the efficiency that these things offer. And that was the surprise for me. They ran really well when I wasn't running really well myself. Now that said, these are definitely a race shoe. You are going to want to be putting these on to go and chase your fastest times and your top end kind of running. They are definitely made for the road. One of the things I've found the stability of these to be sort of a little bit wobbly for my liking, particularly when I went into anything kind of slightly uneven. So those gravel paths, even with the sort of tiniest amount of stones, the stability of these became a real sort of question mark for me. I even found that sometimes when I was on uneven pavements running around London, doing some of those kind of more road miles, when you're going to hit a marathon race where you're likely to be in the middle of roads on sort of fairly flat asphalt, that's probably not going to be so much of a problem. I think these shoes are definitely going to come into their own when you're racing under those kind of normal kind of road racing conditions, which unsurprisingly is what they are designed to do anyway. Unsurprisingly, because not much has changed, everything that you got with the Endorphin Pro 1, you are still going to get on the run with the Endorphin Pro 2. You're still going to get that combination of that speed roll technology and that PWRUN PB foam working together to roll you nice and efficiently through your kind of running gait. There's a nice kind of heel to toe sort of feel to these, and it really boosts that efficiency, particularly at the top paces. That is still here in this shoe. Hasn't changed. And I know that once Nick gets his feet on these, he's going to love them, because that was one of the things that he picked out of our original Endorphin Pro 1 review, one of the things that he really liked. I felt that too. They are not, I think, as pronounced and as poppy as something like the Vaporfly. If I were going to go and race, I would still pick a Vaporfly over these, I think. But actually, as a general sort of shoe that has a bit more versatility, I think there's a lot to be said about the Endorphin Pro 2. I think these can handle a lot more training miles, whereas I don't think that I would necessarily go and train in the Vaporfly. I tend to keep them for race day conditions. I think the other thing that I really noticed about these, if you're comparing them to something like the Vaporfly, is that I didn't feel like, the Vaporfly sort of, sometimes when you put them on, you feel like it sort of rocks you up a little bit and you're almost like ready to go sort of be fired out of a cannon. These felt a little bit more natural, they're a little bit more normal, I guess a little bit more sort of traditional in terms of sort of a running feel, for me anyway, underfoot. I didn't feel like there was so much of a feeling that you're whacking on a super shoe, and that's what I mean in terms of putting these on for sort of doing your daily training. when you put on the Vaporfly, you almost feel like you have to be going and running, I think, a road race, or you're going to go out and run sort of fast miles. These didn't necessarily feel like that, and that, you know, some of the runs I did a half marathon as well, which was just a little amble, to be honest, around sort of some of the forest paths around me where I live here. Fairly slow paces, sort of 8.5 minute miles, just sort of slow for me. That's my sort of easy pace. And I thought they coped really well. I didn't notice them on my foot. I felt like there was efficiency with them. So there's definitely a versatility here that I think was really commendable with the Endorphin Pro 2. Personally, I've loved running in the shoe, and I think a lot of what Nick sort of said about the original Endorphin Pro rings true here. I think that although they're slightly heavier than some of those other super shoes, they run sort of light on the feet still. They don't feel like a heavy shoe. I think they're light, they're nimble, they're agile. I think there's lots of sort of airy room in the toe box, which I really like. There's a good sort of response here. You get back when you kind of pop down on the foot. I think one thing that's interesting for me, whenever I do this, I'm sort of a mid to forefoot striker. I know that Nick's a bit more of a heel striker, and I think I always test out. I sort of see what it's like if I get more when I'm sort of landing further back on my foot. And just if you land further back on your foot, I think you always get a little bit more propulsion forward out of these shoes than you do if you're sort of a bit more up kind of further up the shoe. And I think that's interesting. So if you land a bit further back, I think you're going to feel a bit more of that roll and that speed roll technology a bit more than you might do if you're landing mid to forefoot. That's something that I've found interesting. But overall comfort, and you know, they're a shoe that I think you want to run in, and that's a really important thing. You look down, you pick them up. Definitely feel like I'm happy to put these on, go run in them. In a lot of my reviews, I'll always rattle on about this, but when you look down at a bunch of shoes and you think, what ones do I want to go and run in today? These definitely jump onto that list of shoes that you go, yeah, definitely, absolutely, no problem with that. I will put those on. I know that I'm going to enjoy running in those. Always a really important thing, I think, is just that, you know, it's up here as well as down there. You know, you're feeling them, you look forward to running in these. So that, for me, that makes a very successful shoe if you sort of pick them out of a lineup and go, yeah, I'll always go for those. And these have become something that I think will definitely find a place in my rotation. So my verdict then on the Saucony Endorphin Pro 2, well, these are shoes that are going to be at their best when you're chasing PBs on road races, predominantly up to the marathon. But in my view, I think they're also a lot more versatile than some of the other carbon shoes like a Vaporfly and an AlphaFly. And for that reason, I would be more than happy putting in a lot of sort of faster training miles in these too. They ran okay when I was also running quite slow, which is a really nice thing to have in a shoe in terms of versatility, a range that I'm just not sure you might get out of some of those other super shoes. That's something you do get here. I think they're comfortable at a different range of paces, and that makes them a shoe that I would be more likely to run more breadth of training miles in, for sure. The other thing to say here is if you like the original Endorphin Pro, you're going to like the Pro 2 because essentially nothing here has really changed. So I guess a big question we're going to ask is it better than a Vaporfly or an AlphaFly? How does it stack up against some of those other contenders that are out there? I would still reach for a Vaporfly 2. Personally, I just don't think this has quite the same sort of spring and response that you'll find from some of those shoes. I know that Nick kind of is still a big fan of the AlphaFly. I don't think there's going to be enough changed here to make Nick change his mind about that. So I think for the run testers generally, although we love this shoe and this is a really, really good race shoe, there's a lot to be said about that versatility. I think if you're thinking pure out, what am I going to run my marathon PB chasing race in, I think we would recommend either AlphaFly or Vaporfly over the Endorphin Pro 2. If you're looking for a shoe that might be able to do a lot more, so might be able to cover off a lot more training and then racing, there's a lot to be said for this. This has definitely got a little bit more versatility for me. And I think if you're only going to buy one shoe, or only in the market one shoe, this might be a good thing to look at. Is it better than a Coca Carbon X2? Absolutely, I think definitely. Is it better than something like the Brooks Hyperion Elite? I certainly think so, actually. I just think there's a lot more about this shoe. The way it's put together, the overall sort of feel of it on the run, I much prefer. And when it comes to the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro, I think actually these shoes are quite a close match, I think, in some ways. It's a tight call. I do think that, again, the Endorphin Pro 2 has a bit more versatility and it's locker than the Adios Pro. I love the Adios Pro. It'd be a tough one for me on race day. I think if I were looking at the overall sort of lifespan of the shoe and what it might be able to do generally for me, I think that these might be something that you would buy for that versatility. Whereas again, I think the Pro comes into sort of being a shoe that you whack on for race day and you go chasing PBs in those particular moments for. So a bit more versatility here. The Pro may be a faster or better shoe come race day. The other thing that I wanted to do quickly in terms of the verdict was just check out with Nick, because Nick has run in the Endorphin Speed and the Endorphin Speed 2. And seeing as those shoes are pretty similar, I thought it'd be good to check in with Nick and get his views on whether or not you would go for the Endorphin Speed over maybe the Endorphin Pro. So I chatted to Nick earlier about that particular decision. So we're going to see more new shoes in the Endorphin lineup, and we're not expecting those shoes to change an awful lot. Now, Nick has run in the old Pro and the old Speed. So within the context of this video, I thought it'd be really useful just to get his take on how these shoes fit into a lineup, where you might use them, and which we might recommend to buy. So Nick, talk us through a little bit about the Pro versus Speed debate.
So yeah, obviously the Speed is billed as a kind of fast training partner to the Pro. It's very, very similar all round. It's got the same foam in it. It's just got a nylon plate instead of a carbon plate, which means it's slightly less harsh and stiff underfoot. So the idea is you can do a lot more training in it with that, whereas a carbon plate you might reserve for that slight bit of extra pop when it comes to race day. Now with these shoes, I would say it's a very slight bit extra. So I do think the Endorphin Pro is a slightly faster shoe. It's it's a bit more, you get a bit more propulsion from the full carbon plate. If you did have both, then I would bring out the Pro for maybe my absolute key training sessions and then the race itself. But there's certainly a case for just getting the Speed. Like, I've done loads of fast training in the Speed, I've raced in the Speed, and I really don't think the jump to the Pro is huge. If you're only going to buy one shoe, I'd definitely get the Speed. You can also use it for all your training, really. It's comfortable enough for easy stuff. It's pretty durable. I've put well over 500k on the original one, and it's not really broken down. I think when it comes to the new Speed, we're not expecting very many changes at all. So yeah, if it's a one shoe job, buy the Endorphin Speed. If you are going to buy both, the Pro is that little bit quicker, that little bit kind of snappier on race day, but it's a marginal boost you're getting, and the ride is slightly stiffer and harsher underfoot.
So there you have it. That's our review of the Saucony Endorphin Pro 2. Hope you've answered most of your questions. If we haven't, don't forget just to hit us up in the comments below. We'll be happy to answer all those questions we can get to. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the video to get more. We've got a lot of videos coming up this month. There are a lot of launches coming our way, so we've been really busy. And if you want to see what those videos are and enjoy our upcoming reviews for watches, shoes, all those kind of things, subscribing is the best way to make sure you don't miss them, because we'll let you know when they arrive. But yeah, thank you very much for watching as ever. We really appreciate the support. We've been the Run Testers, and we will hope to see you again soon on the channel. Happy running, people.